They found the bones first, scattered like children's toys along the black soil of Mississippi pine country, but it wasn't the bones that disturbed the locals. It was the missing fingers, each skeleton, each shallow grave, marked by hands that ended abruptly at the knuckle. Something had been taken, something was being kept, and in whispers they began to say his name, James Copeland, the outlaw who made trophies of the human hand. The Gulf Coast of Mississippi was a land crawling with lawless men, deserters, and fugitives who had escaped the grasp of a young and fractured America. Families lived in fear of highwaymen. Churches spoke of devils lurking in the forests. Yet behind these fears hid one man, a man both myth and flesh. James Copeland led a gang unlike any other, and what he took from his victims was not gold, nor livestock, nor land. He took their hands, or rather, the fingers of them. A ritual of theft no sheriff dared speak aloud. Copeland's band of criminals was said to number more than 30. Thieves, arsonists, killers. They called themselves the Brotherhood of the Pines. They swore oaths in abandoned churches, their knives plunged into rotting hymnals, blood dripping across forgotten scripture. But Copeland required something else, a sacrifice. Each man, it was said, carried with him a finger. A token, a trophy, a reminder of their loyalty to him. The earliest records trace back to a traveling merchant found along the Natchez Trace. His body slashed, his belongings gone, but his right hand maimed. The townsfolk thought it savagery until more bodies appeared, again and again. Missing rings, yes. Missing fingers, always. The law could not comprehend it. It wasn't theft. It was ritual. Whispers spread that Copeland kept a chest. Not of gold, but of bones. Fingers neatly arranged, each with its own story. Locals claimed they had seen him sitting by the fire, turning them over in his palm as if counting rosary beads. To him, they were not spoils of violence. They were prayers, offerings to something no one dared name. Towns along the Gulf learned not to travel alone. Farmers slept with rifles across their laps. Children were warned, never wander into the pines. But what truly haunted the people wasn't just Copeland's crimes. It was the silence of those who should have stopped him. Sheriffs who looked away. Preachers who preached louder of the devil, but never named the men in their pews. The corruption ran deeper than the roots of the pines. By 1846, whole families had vanished, their cabins burned to the ground. Survivors, mostly chill, ended up in local orphanages run by the church. But the children told stories in hushed tones. They said Copeland visited them in the night, not as flesh but as shadow. He whispered through the cracks in the walls, asking if they had fingers to spare. Their caretakers told them to pray, but prayer does not stop men like James Copeland. Records from a small seminary in Jackson reveal a curious detail. Several priests, sworn to chastity and poverty, were seen wearing rings that once belonged to murdered merchants. No explanation was ever given. The law asked no questions, but the orphans remembered. They remembered which fingers were missing, and they remembered the priests who now wore them. In Perry County, deep in the forest, there stood a chapel abandoned since the 1820s. The Brotherhood of the Pines made it their temple. Candles burned against moldy walls, illuminating bones stacked in rows like holy relics. Fingers laid upon the altar, a grotesque sacrament. Copeland called it their covenant with the land. Mississippi soil has always kept secrets. Slaves buried without names, families erased by fever, and now the land drank from the blood of Copeland's victims. Some swore the pines grew taller, darker, as if nourished by the offerings. The trees themselves seemed to whisper at night, carrying the screams of those who had died with open palms. In 1849, James Copeland was finally captured, betrayed by one of his own. But even in shackles, he frightened the guards. They said he carried with him a pouch filled with bones. When asked, he said only, "These are my children, they will outlive me." His trial was a spectacle. Families of the dead packed the courtroom, desperate for answers. But Copeland spoke little, he only smiled. Witnesses recounted his crimes, his gang's oath, his chest of fingers. But when pressed on why, he never explained. Only once did he mutter something that silenced the room. "The church knows, the land knows, I only kept their covenant." On October 30, 1857, James Copeland was hanged in Mississippi. As the rope tightened, he asked for one final request, that the sheriff keep one of his fingers. The sheriff refused, but later, when Copeland's body was buried, his hand was missing. No grave robber confessed. Court records from the trial disappeared soon after. Newspaper reports were edited, names of accomplices removed. The Brotherhood was said to dissolve, but locals swore otherwise. They claimed the oath still bound them, that the fingers still circulated through secret hands, passing from generation to generation. In 1872, one of the orphans who had grown into a man returned to the site of the old chapel. He claimed the altar remained, fresh bones sat atop it. He told authorities, but they dismissed him as mad. 2 weeks later he disappeared. His cabin was found burned, his hands gone. Farmers plowing fields still uncover bones. Not entire skeletons, just fragments, fingers curled into the soil as if clawing their way back to the surface. Some say to touch them is to invite Copeland's curse. Children in Perry County are told, if you find a finger bone, bury it deep, or it will come back for yours. The church does not speak of it. The state archives keep only fragments. Even historians avoid the name James Copeland. But silence itself is a language. The omissions, the redactions, the blank spaces in old documents. They tell us something was buried. Something too dangerous for the public to know. Several families in Mississippi still whisper of Copeland bloodlines. Grandfathers who refused to wear rings. Mothers who told their children to never trust a man who looks too long at their hands. These families carry a private shame, a memory of violence that shapes them even now. Trauma inherited like a birthright. Drive through Perry County today and you will still see the pines, endless, dark, silent. Hunters claim to find makeshift shrines in the woods, animal bones, carved initials, candles melted into the dirt. They say the Brotherhood never died, they only learned to wait. History will tell you James Copeland was a thief, a murderer, an outlaw. But history omits the truth, that he was part of something larger. An ancient covenant sealed with blood, preserved with bone. The missing fingers are more than trophies, they are relics, they are reminders. They are the price that must always be paid.